Last Mother's Day. My mom didn't answer my calls again. By midnight, I stopped trying. Honestly, I was used to it. For 11 years, every Mother's Day, she disappeared. No breakfast, no celebration, no explanation. Just silence. Then 3 days after her funeral, I found a small cookie tin hidden in the back of her closet. Inside were 11 yellow bus tickets, every single one dated Mother's Day. Same departure time, same destination. That's when I realized my mother had been visiting someone she never told me about. My name is Sabrina Hale. I'm 29 years old, and what I found at the end of that bus route completely changed the way I understood my mother forever. If you've ever misunderstood someone you loved, only to discover they were carrying pain silently the entire time, this story will stay with you. For as long as I could remember, every Mother's Day started the same way, 6:40 a.m. My mom quietly putting on the same gray sweater, same shoes, same old purse, then leaving the house without explaining where she was going. And every year, I watched from the living room window while she walked toward the bus stop alone. My dad always acted strange on Mother's Day, quiet, tense, like the entire date made him uncomfortable. He'd make coffee silently, turn the TV louder than usual, and pretend not to notice the empty chair at the table. Meanwhile, I spent years wondering the same thing. Why didn't my mom want to spend Mother's Day with me? She always came home late, usually after dark, and every single time, she smelled like rain and lilies. Not perfume, fresh flowers. Sometimes her eyes looked swollen too, like she'd been crying all day. When I was 13, I noticed something strange. Every May, my mother secretly bought 2 birthday candles instead of 1, not accidentally. Every year, 2 candles. And whenever I asked about it, she changed the subject immediately. One year, during a school Mother's Day choir concert, my mom got a phone call, then walked out crying. No explanation. Just grabbed her purse and left the auditorium crying. I remember standing on stage afterward, watching other moms hug their kids, while my seat stayed empty. When I was 16, my mother accidentally called me another girl's name during dinner. Emily, can you pass the... My father dropped his fork immediately, like that name wasn't allowed inside our house. Then she froze immediately. The room went silent. My father looked angry instantly, and my mother quietly whispered, "Sorry, I'm tired." But something about that moment stayed with me for years. One afternoon, I found folded bus schedules hidden inside my mom's purse, highlighted route, highlighted stop. Same departure time circled repeatedly, 6:40 a.m., and suddenly, I realized her disappearances weren't random. They were planned. After my mom died, I started replaying old voicemails just to hear her voice again, and hidden inside one recording, barely audible, I heard something strange. My mother whispering softly to someone, "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner this year." That voicemail changed everything for me. Sometimes the people who seem distant emotionally are actually carrying grief too heavy to explain out loud. 3 days after the funeral, I opened the old cookie tin hidden inside her closet. Inside were yellow bus tickets, flower shop receipts, and faded cemetery payment slips. All dated Mother's Day, every single year, for 11 years. I spread all the bus tickets across my bedroom floor slowly, hands shaking, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then finally, I noticed the destination printed on every ticket. A tiny town outside the city, population barely over 1,000. And honestly, that was the moment I made a decision. I was going to follow the same bus route myself. The next morning, I held one of the yellow bus tickets so tightly it almost bent in half. Same date, same route, same departure time, 6:40 a.m., exactly like every Mother's Day before. And honestly, for the first time in years, I felt closer to my mother after her death than I ever did while she was alive. I boarded the same route my mom took for 11 years. Old seats, rain marks on the windows, that weird smell buses always have early in the morning. Then halfway through the ride, the driver suddenly looked at me carefully and asked, "You related to Claire?" My stomach dropped instantly, because that was my mother's name. The driver smiled sadly, then quietly said, "Your mom never missed that ride. Not once. 11 years. Same seat near the back window. Same flowers in her lap every time." And suddenly, I realized complete strangers knew my mother's ritual better than I did. When the bus stopped in the small town, I followed the route slowly on foot, and almost immediately, I saw a tiny flower shop near the station. The owner froze the second she saw me, then softly whispered, "You have your mother's eyes." That was the moment my chest started tightening. The florist quietly explained something strange. Every single Mother's Day, my mother bought the exact same flowers, white lilies, always 12 stems, never different. And before leaving, she always said the same sentence, "I'm late again." Sometimes grief creates routines so deep, people start living inside them without realizing it anymore. Eventually, the florist pointed me toward a small cemetery outside town. Rain starting lightly, mud along the pathways, and near the entrance, an older groundskeeper immediately recognized my mother's name, then softly said, "She came here more faithfully than anyone I've ever seen." Before I reached the grave, I stopped near a bench to open my mother's old purse again, and hidden inside one pocket, I found a folded child's drawing, crayon flowers, blue sky, stick figure family, and written at the top in messy handwriting, "Love you, Mommy." I didn't recognize the handwriting. I called my grandmother immediately from the cemetery path. The second I mentioned the bus tickets, she went completely quiet. Then after a long pause, she whispered something that made my skin go cold. "Some grief changes the calendar forever." And suddenly, I realized everybody knew something except me. I kept walking through the cemetery slowly, row after row of graves, rain getting heavier. Then finally, I saw it. A tiny white headstone covered in fresh lilies, and the second I read the last name, my knees almost gave out, because it matched mine. I stepped closer carefully, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe, and carved into the stone was the name, Emily Hale, born and died years before I was born. Then underneath, one sentence, "Forever our first daughter." And honestly, that was the exact moment my entire childhood stopped making sense. The most painful family secrets aren't always hidden out of cruelty. Sometimes they're buried because nobody survives talking about them. I stood there in the rain, staring at the tiny white grave for what felt like hours. Emily Hale, same last name, same family. And suddenly, all those empty Mother's Days started replaying differently in my head. The bus rides, the lilies, the crying. None of it was random. My mother had been coming here the entire time. I called my father immediately. The second I said the name on the grave, he stopped breathing for a second, then quietly whispered, "You weren't supposed to find that place." That was the moment I realized something devastating. I had an older sister, and nobody ever told me she existed. My father finally admitted the truth slowly. Years before I was born, my mother lost her first daughter in a rainy highway accident. Emily was only 6 years old, and after the funeral, my father said the house became unbearable. Every photo made my mother stop functioning for days. Every toy triggered another breakdown. So eventually, he packed everything away, trying to save what was left of our family. But honestly, I think all that silence only buried the grief deeper. Suddenly, my entire childhood started making sense. The empty photo spaces in closets, the missing early family albums, the way my mother cried during children's songs. And honestly, I realized my family wasn't hiding a secret from me. They were hiding from their own grief. I sat beside the grave for a long time trying to process everything. Then suddenly, something hit me hard. My middle name, Emily, the name my mother gave me, belonged to the daughter she lost first. Sometimes love after loss looks strange from the outside, because grief changes people in ways children can't understand yet. When I got home, I searched through my mother's closet again, and hidden behind old sweaters, I found a small cassette tape labeled Mother's Day. My hands were shaking before I even pressed play. The tape started with silence. Then finally, my mother's voice. Soft, exhausted, crying quietly. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom again. Not talking to me, talking to Emily." And honestly, that was the moment my chest completely broke. Halfway through the recording, my mother started softly singing a lullaby, voice cracking between words. And suddenly, I recognized it instantly. She used to sing the exact same song to me when I was little, which meant something devastating. She never stopped being Emily's mother, even after becoming mine. A few days later, I returned to the cemetery again, and the old groundskeeper quietly told me something I'll never forget. "Your mother talked to her like she was still growing up. Birthdays, school stories, weather updates, every year. She sat beside that grave, trying to continue a relationship death interrupted. I spent my whole life believing my mother kept leaving me every Mother's Day, believing I somehow mattered less. But sitting there beside Emily's grave, I finally understood the truth. My mother wasn't abandoning me. She was trying to survive the guilt of losing a child, while still learning how to love the one who came after. The hardest thing about hidden grief is how often children mistake it for lack of love. After finding the cassette tapes, I started searching through the house differently, slower, more carefully. And inside my mother's closet, behind hanging coats, I noticed something strange. Tiny pencil marks hidden along the wall, dates beside them, heights, and one name written over and over, Emily. My mother kept a hidden growth chart for a daughter who never got the chance to grow up. The marks suddenly stopped at age 6, and honestly, that broke me in a way I still can't explain, because suddenly, I realized grief froze part of my mother's life permanently. One afternoon, I opened a storage box in the garage. Inside were 11 stuffed rabbits. Same size, same ribbon color, each tagged with a year. My grandmother quietly explained, "Your mother bought one every Mother's Day. One for every year Emily should have gotten older." Then I found something even harder to understand. Old printed weather reports, rain forecasts, highway conditions, all from the exact date of the accident. My mother kept rereading the weather from the day she lost her daughter. Like somewhere inside those pages, she was still searching for a different ending. Hidden inside her Bible, I found an old hospital bracelet wrapped carefully in tissue paper, small enough for a child, faded almost white with age, and printed across it, "Emily Hale." That was the moment her grief stopped feeling distant to me, because suddenly, Emily wasn't just a secret anymore. She felt real. Some mothers don't stop grieving because they're weak. They stop living normally because part of them never left the moment they lost their child. One night, my father finally told me the truth about the accident. My mother had been driving during heavy rain. Emily was asleep in the back seat. And after the crash, my mother blamed herself every single day afterward. No matter how many people told her it wasn't her fault, she never believed them. Then my father quietly admitted something else. After Emily died, he couldn't handle hearing her name anymore. So he removed the photos, packed away the toys, avoided conversations. Pause. Then softly whispered, "I thought silence would save your mother. But honestly, I think silence buried all of us instead." That night, I listened to the final cassette tape completely for the first time. My mother sounded older, tired, almost emotionally exhausted. Then near the end, she whispered something that completely shattered me. I failed both my daughters. And honestly, I started crying so hard I had to stop the tape. That's when I finally understood why Mother's Day hurt her so deeply. It wasn't because she didn't love me. Every Mother's Day reminded her of the one child she couldn't bring home anymore. Every commercial, every bouquet, every smiling family photo. All of it reopened the same wound every single year. My grandmother quietly revealed one final thing before leaving that night. My mother visited Emily's grave 1 week before she died. Even weak, even sick. She still took the 6:40 bus, still brought lilies, still sat beside that tiny white grave in the rain, because after all those years, she never stopped being Emily's mother. The deepest love stories aren't always romantic. Sometimes they're the invisible bonds between mothers and children they never stopped missing. The next Mother's Day after my mom died, I woke up before sunrise automatically, 6:40 a.m., the exact time she used to leave every year. And for the first time in my life, the house felt emptier than the cemetery ever could. I stopped at the same flower shop my mother visited for 11 years. The florist recognized me immediately, then softly asked, "White lilies again?" This time, I bought 2 bouquets, one from a daughter and one from a sister. I took the same bus route alone, same early silence, same rain against the windows, same seat near the back. And suddenly, I started imagining my mother sitting there every year by herself, holding flowers quietly, trying to survive another Mother's Day. And honestly, that thought hurt more than anything else. When I reached the cemetery, Emily's grave already had fresh rainwater resting on the flowers. I placed both bouquets down carefully, then sat there silently for a long time, not angry anymore, not confused, just finally understanding. Before leaving, the groundskeeper stopped me quietly, then handed me a sealed envelope. "Your mother asked me to give you this someday." My hand started shaking immediately, because suddenly, it felt like my mom was still speaking to me somehow. Sometimes the truth doesn't erase the pain, but it changes the way you carry it forever. I opened the letter slowly beside the grave and instantly recognized my mother's handwriting. Messy, shaky, familiar. Then the first sentence completely broke me. "If you're reading this," then I finally ran out of time. She wrote about Emily, the accident, the guilt, the years she spent believing she failed as a mother. Then halfway through the letter, she wrote something I'll never forget. "Please don't think I loved you less." I couldn't stop crying after that. The final page explained everything. The truth is, I loved you enough to keep surviving after losing her. And honestly, that sentence changed my entire life, because suddenly, I understood something heartbreaking. Loving me was the reason she stayed alive at all. Before leaving the cemetery, I took the oldest yellow bus ticket from my pocket, the first one my mother ever saved, then carefully placed it beneath Emily's flowers. Rain starting softly again, wind moving through the trees, and for the first time ever, I stayed beside the grave instead of feeling abandoned by it. For 11 years, I thought my mother was leaving me every Mother's Day. I thought she loved the memory of another child more than the daughter standing right in front of her. But the truth was so much sadder than that. The truth was, she kept returning to the daughter she never got to bring home. And maybe that's why she always came home crying. Maybe every bus ride, every bouquet of lilies, every silent Mother's Day was her way of apologizing to a child she never stopped missing. One daughter she lost, and one daughter she was terrified of losing too. And honestly, I think understanding that finally gave me my mother back, even after she was gone.